All right. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Increasing Your EDO's funding to remain competitive with our presenters. I'll introduce them in just a second. I just have a few housekeeping announcements before we begin. I have the world's slowest PowerPoint. There we go. We just ask that everyone stay on mute during the presentation. We will have a Q&A portion at the end. And if you want to come off mute when you want to ask a question, that's totally fine. But during the presentation, we just ask that you stay on mute. We ask everyone to introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us where you're coming from, your title, and what company you're with. That would be great. You can also feel free to chat in the chat. If you have a question for our presenter or for another attendee, feel free to use that function. We are recording this session and we will share it after the session ends. And we do ask that you complete the evaluation that we'll send out just to let us know how you thought the presentation went and also topics for the future. I'd like to thank our sponsor, EDO Marketplace. EDO Marketplace is the first and only platform dedicated exclusively to connecting economic development professionals with trusted service providers who specialize in their field. Whether you're looking for cutting-edge GIS tools, business attraction software, or tailored solutions for your community's unique needs, EDO Marketplace is your one-stop shop. It features hundreds of articles, podcasts, and videos submitted by industry experts. It's a platform designed to save you time, connect you with the right partners, and empower you to drive meaningful results in your community. If you haven't already, I strongly suggest you look into EDO Marketplace and see if they would be the right fit for you. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our two presenters today. We have Beth Blanton, Vice President of Engagement for Lakeshore Advantage, and we have Kevin Donovan, Capital Campaign Project Director for Convergent Nonprofit Solutions. And with that, I will stop my screen share and I will let Kevin take over. Thanks, Kevin and Beth.
Thank you. And just give me a minute to get this one up. Can everyone see that? Can you give me a thumbs up? Good. All right. All right. So as Jennifer mentioned, Kevin Donovan with Convergent Nonprofit Solutions. I'm just going to talk briefly about what we do and hand it over to Beth to talk about Lakeshore Advantage. So Convergent, we work with various nonprofits around the country, founded in 2009. And we focus on capital campaigns. And we work typically with organizations that do not have the staff or the expertise to actually conduct and manage a fundraising campaign. But our specialty is really economic development with chambers and economic development organizations. So we've been really successful with that. One of the things that we bring to the table with this expertise is a real understanding of the trends in the industry, economic trends. We've been able to see what's going on around the country. And we take those learnings and we apply them to our clients as we go forward. An example of that, as many of you know, I think one of the top issues in our world these days is workforce, talent acquisition. And now that's evolving to the point where it's not just getting people into positions and increasing the workforce, but all the other things that are connected to that, like housing, like childcare, like amenities, quality of life, all these things are now really tied together. And we're beginning to see that, you can't just focus on one thing. They're all connected in a way. So that's just one example. And as we go from client to client, we are able to actually take those learnings and give them the information that they need to compete with other cities, towns, and communities. So that's been a real benefit for us. And, we bring that to our clients. I'm just trying to see how I advance. Jennifer, is there something I'm doing?
I think you just click it with your mouse, maybe.
Stop. I'm going to just stop and start again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and it jumps way ahead. Okay.
It was catching up.
Okay.
You were.
Yeah, there we go. All
There
right.
we
So
go.
this is
Perfect.
just the kind of big picture. These are all either chambers or economic development organizations that we've worked with. There's a bit of a kind of we originate in the southeast rather, but we are growing north and west and broadening our scope and reach, and with great success. So just to give you an idea, this is who we work with. Lakeshore Advantage right there at the top. So that's what we do and who we are. I'll hand it over to Beth.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. And before I kind of jump into this, I want to start with just a thank you, especially to Jennifer and the team at Great Lakes Economic Development Council. For me, and Kevin, I don't know if you feel like this a little bit too, this feels a little bit like an opportunity to get the band back together. And for the greater part of 2025, the Convergent team, and especially Kevin, worked really closely and really just became part of the Lakeshore Advantage team and worked closely with us through this, what ended up being about a 10-month campaign. So this has been fun, and getting ready to kind of reshare this story was a fun exercise and kind of reminiscing. And it's like, gosh, Kevin, remember it was in January. It feels like 100 years ago, but it wasn't even that long ago. So we have had a very productive year, and I'm excited to just kind of share a flyover on some of what we learned, lessons learned. And to start, I thought it might be helpful to just give a little bit of background and share with the audience some DNA that's special to Lakeshore Advantage. So a little bit about our organization and what we're about. So we are the EDO for Ottawa and Allegan counties in West Michigan. We were founded in the early 2000s, so we're about 22 years old. Our origin story is a good one. I'll save it for another time, just to respect our time here. But it is something that we reminded our investors in these conversations, kind of a little bit about, hey, remember where we started. And we still, although as an organization we've grown and our footprint has grown, we really have stayed true to how we were founded. So early in the 2003, a group of business and community leaders determined that an EDO was really necessary for our region. And so, as I mentioned, we have evolved as a team in terms of our footprint and our size, but what has remained steady through those 22 years is who we're focused on. So for us, the way we really approach economic development in our region is by staying laser focused on our primary employers. And those companies that are exporting goods and services, those companies essentially that are doing business globally. And for our region, we have about 700 companies that fit that definition. We are really fortunate to have an extremely diverse regional economy spanning from, mostly we're about 3 times more concentrated in manufacturing than the national average. And we have a very diverse industry base from, smart manufacturing with agribusiness and automation and aerospace and advanced energy storage. So we really have quite a breadth of and a lot of diversity in our region. If you want to go to the next slide, Kevin. Something else that's really, I think, integral to Lakeshore Advantage is we are a heads-up organization. So we know that what we do, we're not doing in a vacuum. And we're not competing with Michigan. Really, we have to be heads up and be holding ourselves accountable and thinking about who we're competing with. Obviously, we know it's a global market and we're really competing globally. But when we think about who is our closest competition for jobs and investment, we look regularly, more than annually, at our comparative communities. And so these are some of those indicators that we're watching. And one of the things, if you go back really where this story kind of started for us around the campaign and then the need that we realized we had, was that post-pandemic, there were just some signs of some of these things just seem to be like, we're keeping up, but some of these things are at risk. And so I wanted to share that with this group just to know that that is really helpful. It was kind of a bellwether for us because we have been looking at these indicators now for almost 10 years. It helps us as we plan we do the 1 year, 5 year, 10-year plan. You want to go ahead to the next one?
Also.
Thank you. And so also kind of part of that, those early days, like as we're thinking about 2023 and coming out of the pandemic, there were a few things that were happening for us organizationally. And I know many of you are EDO practitioners in the room. I don't have to remind you about what it was like to be, working in that role during the pandemic. But one of the things we kind of noticed as a team was that even a year or two after all of the craziness of all the support and things that we really helped navigate our companies through, it never felt like we really went back to equilibrium. And we felt like, man, we just don't seem to have the bandwidth and the horsepower that we feel like we need to continue to do that fundamental, those challenges and do the blocking and tackling that we've always been doing with our companies. But then also we saw these other kind of emerging challenges really start to ramp up. So for us, what was also creating a sense of urgency internally for our team and with our board was, things that were keeping us up at night around workforce, which we all know we're all kind of facing these, like, how are we attracting and keeping this very coveted emerging workforce, those 24 to 35-year-olds that if you're not growing, you are not going to be having really great sustainable long-term growth. That was keeping us up at night, and we just didn't have the bandwidth to really be able to address that. We also were seeing and thinking more and more about how many of our jobs in our 2-county region are tied to companies that are headquartered outside our region. So yes, we have a lot of wonderful companies that are headquartered here. We also have many global companies that have footprints here, but those decisions are being made far and away from our little area in Michigan. And so, man, we started thinking about, well, how are we cultivating those relationships? And as those leadership, the local leadership changes, and if we don't have those strong relationships at headquarters, how are we approaching that? And these were some really big questions that we were asking, our board was asking. And again, we just didn't have the bandwidth really and the resources really to address those things. And that's really kind of where our paths crossed with Convergent.
So then we decided, where do we go from here? And before we actually jump right into the campaign, there's a whole bunch of foundational work that went into this. I'm going to talk through some of this. So one of the first things that we did was there was some research done to look at Lakeshore Advantage and see where they fell relative to some peer groups, some other communities and their EDOs. And this is kind of a snapshot of some of the findings that we had. So we looked at the top 25 investors of these organizations, a few of them around the country, and we looked at where that investment came from. So the top 25, you can see on the left, this is a breakdown of what the peer groups look like compared to Lakeshore Advantage. And so that gray line is Lakeshore Advantage, and then the orange is the peer group. And there were two things that really jumped out at us. The first being that, as you can see, the government or the public sector support for Lakeshore Advantage is pretty large. It's almost a quarter of all the support that they get. And the peer groups, at least this group set, there was no public sector support. Now, I want to just mention that most, if not all, most EDOs and chambers, I mean, they do get some public sector support. So I don't think that's a really representative snapshot. But in this case, we know that private sector was really driving these peer groups more than anything. The other thing that we saw is that Lakeshore Advantage was very underrepresented in a couple of sectors, most notably in this case, healthcare and financial institutions. So you can see in the banks, financial institutions, even credit unions, those are over a quarter of the funding that those peer groups get in their top 25, and very low for Lakeshore Advantage. So those were good data points for us. They set us up to understand that there was a real opportunity to look at those sectors and use this information to actually show that they need to step up and be a part of this in their community. The other thing that we do this with every campaign, is we do a feasibility study. So we don't actually go forward with a campaign until we are pretty sure we're going to win. And so this is a list of the things that we do in that study. These are basically, we do a number of interviews, and these are what we walk away with. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of these things. Part of the study, we want to actually validate that the organization has what we call asking rights for a campaign. So in other words, the organization is well respected in the community. They are competent, they are effective. The business community in particular knows that they're not only going to execute on a plan, but they're going to manage the funding the right way to actually achieve measurable goals. Challenges and opportunities, components of the plan. So what we do in the study is we present a draft plan and we get input on that. And we emphasize it's a draft because we want to actually get people kind of invested emotionally, if we can, in that plan and have their input, because if they contribute to it, they're more likely to underwrite it. And so we make them part of that process. They're in the loop and we get their input. And when we go forward with a refined plan, their fingerprints are on that ideally. So they're part of that. Another very important part of this is indications of financial support. So we don't actually make any asks during that study, but we do get indications of support. So we ask all of our participants to give us a range, high to low, of what they would be willing to give as far as an investment for the plan. And this actually helps us validate a test goal that we're sharing in the study and recommend an achievable goal for the organization if we go forward in the campaign. And, in some cases, if they're not if that support is not out there, we are going to recommend that they not go forward, at least not at that time. So that's a very important part of it. And finally, just touching on cultivation, our study gives us a chance to actually meet with these people who are going to be our top investors and actually get to know them. And so, building that rapport with them kind of lays the groundwork for if we go forward in campaign, we already know them, we understand what is important to them, and we can reference what we talked about previously in the study. And it makes it a lot easier to get to a yes when we are in that campaign. So these are all pieces of that study. Now, the structure of the study, this is usually between 50 and 75 interviews. It is confidential because we want candid input on the organization and the plan. Typically, it's going to be the top employers who are very likely high-value prospective investors as well. There's overlap between those first two bullets. But we also want key influencers in the community, people who understand the community, and they may not be a big investor, but they know where the money is. And so they're a big help as well, and they can help guide us on the plan and make sure that it's doing the right things. Public sector, board members, very important. Board members, we want them, we need 100% board participation if we can get it, because obviously when you go beyond the board, it's important to be able to say that the board, the leadership is fully behind the plan. And as I mentioned, what we want to do is understand asking rights and the funding goal, and just validate that the organization will be supported. So when we did our study for Lakeshore Advantage, all those things came back positive, and we found enough support for a funding goal of 1.6 to $2.1 million out there in support of it. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Beth to talk about, again, about Lakeshore Advantage and some of the other information that went into our case for investment.
Thanks, Kevin. So I would just also say, not only the feasibility study, I mean, that was critical to obviously going into the campaign, but even before that, we're so thankful for the information that came out of the benchmarking exercise that we did as well. And Convergent helped us with that too, even before the feasibility study. So again, that homework really gets its work, and it also pays off because we felt so prepared to be able to go into, once we determined we're doing this, you really are equipped with a lot of relevant and compelling information. So one of the questions that I know we really wrestled with as a team is, so Kevin just got us through, all right, the process of the feasibility study, and here's what we think, is out there that it's feasible to be able to raise. But then as an organization, you're kind of like going, okay, when do we do this? And I know oftentimes it's just immediately, you should just immediately jump right into it is probably the best practice. So for us, and Kevin will talk next a little bit about some of the things we were considering that we really had to navigate and kind of thread that needle, because we had some timing issues that we really needed to think through. But that being said, this image and this kind of infographic was something that we ended up using in all of our meetings. And this is actually something that we as a team have used before too, to think about. It really informs the work of what we're doing. And the bottom line is, we know that our employers have a lot of choices. So every dark blue state represents a place where our companies, those 700 companies, are located. And actually, I misspoke. It's the third of our 700 companies that have indicated to us in the last year that they have plans to expand. So they're going to invest jobs, they're going to invest in real estate, they're going to expand. And we know that there's a lot of options. Just because they're located here doesn't mean that investment will happen here. And so we as a team are thinking every day about how do we make that case as strong as possible for our companies to keep that investment here. So this was, and it is, the truth for us. You can see those, comparative communities that I talked about earlier that we benchmark ourselves against. But again, it's a reminder for our investors or for our donors to put this in front of them and go, this is what's driving us. This is what's creating the sense of urgency. So it really helps them understand why now, to answer that question of why now.
So some of the considerations as we got ready to move forward with the campaign, we just had to keep in mind that these were, most if not all of these prospects were existing investors already. So Lakeshore Advantage had recently built a new home, the Next Center in Holland, and beautiful new facility. And there was a lot of support from the community. And so we had some of our biggest investors were behind the creation of this facility. So that was something we had to keep in mind. There was ongoing support, obviously, as well for the organization. So the question was like, how do you separate what we're trying to do with this plan from what they've already done? And so we really needed to differentiate the plan that we were presenting from all the other support that they had. And this was really important because we weren't looking for them to just continue giving us what they had already been giving, but we needed them to go up. And part of the way we differentiated this was to create that freestanding plan. And this is why we very often refer to it as a capital campaign. So it's a well-defined 5-year plan with goals and initiatives. And we want to have that transparency in which their investment is being allocated exclusively to this plan so that they have a clear understanding that it is incremental to what the organization is currently doing. And that's critical for success, because otherwise it's, you're just at risk of them just saying, well, I'm already giving money. Why do you need more? We need to answer that question really well. Anything to add to this, Beth? I think that's pretty much.
I think the one other piece, like context I would add to is that this was designed very intentionally to be a private sector campaign. And so that also, as Kevin mentioned, I mean, we had a little bit of heartburn over the fact of like, we had just about a year before had been meeting with our private sector supporters, and we were in the midst of multi-year pledges for the building. Now, we know that is a totally different ask, and those are totally different needs that from what we're talking about raising for. But it definitely did as the slide says, it was a key consideration, and we really had to think through that and talk strategically with our board and all of that. But ultimately, we knew for all the other reasons we've kind of already talked about, we had to really, the time was now, and we had to move forward.
So when we did move forward, as you can see, I mean, we've already talked about all the work that went into actually getting to the starting line for this campaign. So even at the starting line, there was still a lot of work to do before we actually started making these requests for support. And so this is just kind of our 7 major milestones in what we call, well, actually beginning with a quiet phase, and there's 5 here. And what you'll notice here is those first 4 all happened before we actually make that first request for support. So very quickly, I'll go through this. Program refinement. We take the draft of the plan that we presented in the feasibility study, and we incorporate the feedback that we received during that study. We made a lot of changes in the plan before we went into the campaign. So we got that input, we strengthened it, and we created a very nice piece, which we call our case for investment. And this is basically an overview. It begins with a letter from the co-chairs. We'll talk about that a bit, our leadership. It talks about the challenges, the urgency, and the reason that Beth touched on that the organization needs to go forward with this plan. Then we get into the plan itself. We'll talk about there's usually 3 or 4 initiatives that are part of it. We talk about the outcomes, the budget, and any other information about the plan that we need, and especially about the impact of that plan. So campaign materials development, part of program refinement, those first 2 steps happen in the first stage of the campaign. We also do what we call prospect evaluation. So we want to actually proceed with what we call top-down and inside out. So top down, what we mean is we start with our highest level investors, or at least our prospects, and we bring in a small committee of people who are connected to the community, and they can help us zero in on what the right level, what the right ask amount is for them. It's not an exact science, so we get input on that, and we make our best estimate of what we think they are capable and interested in investing in this plan. We create a long list, and we want to get to usually like the top 25 or 30 for our quiet phase of the campaign. That number is probably going to get us to about 80% of our goal. So we spent a lot of time focusing on those prospects. And then leadership recruitment, we recruit what we call campaign co-chairs, voluntary role. These are people who are going to be making an example setting investment, pretty high up on our list, well connected in the community. Obviously, we like to have some diversity if we can, definitely sector diversity. And also age diversity is good, and gender diversity. People have different connections to the community. We want to have a wide net different networks. And we are really looking to associate our campaign with these people. They are the face of the campaign. So if we find the right people, we're going to make it work for them. There's no firm meeting requirements for them, because we want them to do this any way they can. And so that's a really important part of that role, just being associated with the campaign. And then finally, we're ready to actually start making asks. So we make those asks to the top 20 or 30. And if we can bring other leaders, other board members in to those meetings, that's a big benefit. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to get the board 100% invested as quickly as we can, because being able to say that they're on board, they're invested in this plan, is a great talking point for our meetings. So we take this process when we start that quiet or finish that quiet phase, we should be more than halfway to our goal. And then from there, we do what we call a campaign kickoff. So this is our public launch of the campaign. And this is an event. It can be like a breakfast event or after work. And it's basically a celebration. It's got two purposes, really. Celebration and recognition of our existing investors. We want to recognize them, as well as our co-chairs and our other volunteers for the campaign. And also a call to action to other prospective investors, people we may have made an ask to and we're waiting to hear from them. Others who may not be familiar with what the campaign is doing or what the organization does. So this is exposing them to the plan. And we want to get them on board as well. So the kind of the high point of this event, and it's usually, it's no more than an hour in most cases, but we actually unveil where we are towards our goal, which is more than halfway. So that's kind of like the peak moment, big suspense, and then we unveil it. And then, what we're saying with that is that this campaign is successful. It's got momentum. We've got great leadership. We've got great investors. Come on board and join it. And then from there, the remainder of the campaign is just finishing out that list. Our overall list is probably going to be over 100 prospects. So we want to get to our goal, obviously, and that post-public launch phase, that can take maybe 2 or 3 months afterwards, and we just finish it out. And in some cases, the organization itself doesn't need us any longer to do that. They can do those on their own. But by this time, they have enough momentum to actually get to their goal. Whoops. So I want to touch on the importance of the campaign brand and one of the things that campaigns typically do. Again, this goes back to differentiating what the organization already does. We need to actually create both a campaign and a plan that sets itself apart from the existing activities of the organization. And as I mentioned, the plan itself, there's transparency. People understand that their investment is going directly to this plan. And as with many brands, if you do it the right way, it generates some brand equity. People understand what it means. There's some excitement attached to it. And I feel like, we were able to do a really good job with this campaign. We got a great brand, and I'm going to give it to Beth to talk about that.
Yeah, this was fun. This was definitely for me a fun part of this, coming up with that identity. And so just wanted to share a few things that went into our decision to come up with naming and giving the campaign an identity. So for us, we knew, especially from the feasibility study, it had been reinforced. We have a strong, recognizable brand. And so we wanted to come up with something, both, the phrase or what it was called, and also that word mark that would complement it, that wouldn't dilute our current brand, but that would really complement it. So we came up with Powering Our Future, which for us felt like, action oriented. It felt positive and kind of obviously future focused, but also collective. We did a little bit of color play with adding green and orange and kind of a nod to our lakeshore and the water and our manufacturing sector, with kind of that O being a little bit, movement with either water or is it a gear. So we did have, we had a graphic designer do this for us. So we did, farm that out, which I would highly recommend, just so that we could keep it moving forward. The other thing that worked really well for us is that we kept this decision to just a really small group. So it was myself and it was our marketing lead. And, we had like our president, she weighed in when we were kind of down to two options, like, do you like this or that better? But we find, design by committee doesn't always work. It really doesn't really ever work in my experience. So that would just be one kind of lesson learned and something that worked well for us. And I will also say one of the hardest, it's fine, Kevin, you can advance, but I would say, I think one of the hardest things for us has been sunsetting the Powering Our Future. It really stuck, and it's now vernacular with our team and our board. So we're working on kind of sunsetting that and now regrouping to like, no, now this is just, it's not the 5-year plan. It's just now the work that we do. So yep, this is perfect. So one of the important parts of telling that story and baking this into the case for investment was helping our donors, our investors, be reminded of our regional brand. So not just who we are as an organization, but for us, some of the things that make our region unique. I mentioned earlier, we have 3x times the amount of manufacturing in our region. We are a very industrious, hardworking, known for that. And I think there's a lot of community pride in that as well. We have a highly skilled workforce because of our manufacturing sector being so strong. We also have a really robust, streamlined process in our community, from connecting educators, our secondary ed, to STEM careers, high demand STEM careers. So we wanted to make sure that in these conversations, that as we were really laying that groundwork and kind of setting the table on these conversations, that we were reminding our investors of just, how special this place is, that we tend to be a region that kind of punches above its weight class and doesn't sit around waiting for someone else to figure it out. We figure it out for ourselves. So using some of just knowing that your region's DNA is, that would be my advice to anyone who's maybe going to, start this process, is make sure it's true and authentic, but really it helps evoke that community pride or that regional pride or whatever it is, the footprint it is that you're working with. So in addition to that, I wanted to show this slide as well, because again, just like we want to be authentic and real and remind ourselves and each other about what makes our region unique and strong and the advantages, we also wanted to share too about some of the challenges that are facing us that really no amount of fundraising is going to do anything about. And so this wasn't an exact slide that we had in the case for investment, but we did talk about, we're a peninsula. And so if you're going to do business in Michigan, you're not probably going to end up here by accident. It's going to be an intentional choice. And so one of the things we know we have going against us is our region can only attract and recruit from 3 directions. We love Lake Michigan, and we have this beautiful, huge body of water next to us, but there's a reality there. And then, we talked a little bit about we're not a travel hub and the distance that we have between deep water ports and those types of things. I will say this, I think as economic developers, sometimes it's easy for us to forget that what we know and what's so just second nature to us isn't always this like common knowledge with who is funding our work and who we're working with. And so, I mean, there was one conversation, CEO, just sharp CEO for, been CEO for one of our largest employers for decades, or not maybe decades, maybe 20 years. And he was like, I've been here for 20, I've never thought of that. It has never occurred to me. So I think, again, my encouragement is to really think about what are the realities that you and your team are thinking about day to day? What are those insights that are specific to economic developers? And really be sure to share those insights during these conversations, because you might be surprised that they may be things that your investors and donors have never even thought about.
So I'm going to actually, as we've noticed here, what we're doing is very much in the flow of what we did in the room with our prospects. And I'm just going to jump ahead, call a little bit of an audible here and jump to the plan and what that plan looked like when we presented it before I talk about ROI. So this is just a snapshot of the final version of the case for investment that we came away with. So, we kept that powering our future theme throughout. And the three initiatives that we had, powering the future workforce. So really focusing in on accelerating attraction, retention, and growth on the talent pipeline. So this was an urgency. And so next generation of high demand and emerging workers needed to actually strengthen that pipeline for the reasons that Beth noted. So being competitive for those employers so that they can get the people that they need. The second one, powering our primary employers and communities. So being able to strengthen that service to those employers and creating the conditions in which they will stay, they will grow, they will be stable, they will get the help they need, breaking down barriers to their growth, all of those things. And so really reminding them that they are so important for this community. That's the resources that go towards that. That was a big part of this. And then finally powering the next generation of employers. So this really the kind of the tangible manifestation of this third initiative is the Next Center and creating that ecosystem for entrepreneurs, new businesses that are not even known yet, getting them to actually start up there and creating that environment in which they can succeed and fail if necessary, but learn and attract that kind of energy to the region. So this was kind of the core of the plan, and we like to actually share diagrams like this one because it just kind of shows the big picture. So you can see on the left the challenges that are facing the region. These are the things that were really the why. Why are they going far? Why does this have to be done? This is what creates that urgency. And so the plan itself in the middle there, those are those three initiatives that we talked about, which are created to directly address those challenges. And then on the right, the outcomes that we expect. So this is where that return on investment is going to come from. But we need to actually just show a measurable return. And so by showing this type of picture, we're able to give them the whole kind of flow from the why and the how, and then what do we get from it? So it's pretty useful for that type of discussion. Now, one of the things that is really important for our presentations is what we do, what we call our ROI analysis. So we do this ahead of the actual campaign or as part of that foundational work. And we do an economic impact analysis. And in this case, we projected there would be 5,000 new jobs as a result of this plan over a 5-year period. And from that, we can extract various impacts, various benefits. And I kind of list them all here. So one of them is new capital investment, and then startup, a portion of that is startup investment. What was really useful to us as well is that through that job creation, you're getting 5,000 new jobs, but not listed here. You're also getting another 4,400 indirect jobs. So you've got almost 10,000 jobs that we can attribute to this plan. And from that, the earnings from those jobs, about a $500 million in new earnings in the region from those jobs. And from that, you get about 318 million in new annual consumer spending. So when we go into the room and we're sharing this with our prospects, if they're from a particular sector, a lot of times we're able to actually share what that direct impact is on their sector. So this is really useful because obviously we want to actually distinguish what we're doing here from any kind of a donation. This is a true investment. Therefore, it should have a true ROI. And that's what we're going to focus on as we go through as we tell our story. So, campaign results. So, Beth, want to
Yeah,
talk about that for us?
mic drop. We did it. We actually exceeded. I mean, and Kevin, I feel like we kind of made it sound so easy, but I mean, it was 10 months of especially those first 4 months or so were a lot of intense number of meetings, right? Doing all those ask meetings. But at the end of the day, at the end of those 10 months, we exceeded the campaign goal. We got there. One thing that I'm really excited and proud of is that, and it was really a mandate from our board, is they wanted to see the base of support broaden. They said we can't just go to who's already investing. And we have a significant amount of these dollars are coming from new sources now. So that's wonderful. What would you add, Kevin?
Well, I do want to actually touch on some of the why we won things about this. This is really, I think, what I found to be special about Lakeshore Advantage. It doesn't apply in every campaign, but we succeeded in part because they were able to find a lot of new sources of investment, particularly community foundations. And to me, that's a real testament to an organization that may not have any direct connection to businesses, recognizing that this work has a broad impact, a broad positive impact beyond businesses to the community in general. So they got a lot of new support from those community foundations. Beth, you should talk about your relationship with these other organizations in the region, which I also think is very complementary, very unique.
Yeah, something we didn't touch on yet, but I think it's special to West Michigan is how collaborative we are. So for instance, in our 2-county footprint, I believe there's 8 chambers. We see our chamber partners as allied organizations that we want to complement. We do not want to duplicate. So while we're all working towards the same goals, ultimately, we see our roles as totally different in how we do that. So for us, we have strong partnerships. We're members of all of the chambers. We work closely. We meet regularly. Parts of our teams are connecting, regularly. And that goes a long way, not only for those working relationships, but our business community loves that. They love it. So, and I know that is, that's a special thing. And we've made some really great strides over the last 10 years in really even building some of those relationships that at one point maybe weren't as positive as they are today. So it can take time and work, but it can be done and it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and I would just, I guess, wrap up and just say one of the most important things, obviously, is that asking rights, the respect that the organization has in the community. Lakeshore Advantage has great leadership. It was an honor to work with them. I think we told a great story. It really resonated with leaders in the community. They recognized that this was something they needed to be a part of, and that led us to the finish line and our goal. So, I know we used up a lot. We got 10 minutes, I guess, Jennifer, for questions.
Yeah, we have There, am I unmuted? Yeah, we have about 10 minutes for questions. So for the participants, if you have any questions, there's still time to put those in the chat. Beth, Kevin, thank you for such a great presentation. We do have a couple of questions for you. And so I'll just start with the first one. Did you face any challenges or pushback from business leaders considering the money you raised was above and beyond their current investment level? And how did you address that?
Well, we definitely did. I think, when we look ahead or look back and think about who we thought were going to be the lead investors, that was not the way it ended up. So we did face that pushback because of existing investment in the community. And the way we addressed is we really had to kind of double down on expanding the reach, finding new sources of investment. And that was one of the goals that, Jennifer and Beth, that they had planned on doing that anyway. So, we knew we needed to use this to actually broaden that reach, either way. So, we were oriented in that direction, but new investment was a huge part of this. Beth, anything to add to that?
We got some no's, and we knew we would along the way. I think some of them surprised us, but ultimately I look back at those conversations or those multiple conversations, and it's not for naught. I mean, we had these meaningful interactions. We got to tell our story, and it wasn't I still feel like at the end of the day, those conversations were so worth it. And we learned, we got feedback, and we used that for future conversations.
Thank you. Thank you. And so I have another question. How did you come up to the decision to hire a consultant to help with your study and campaign? What was the response from your investors meeting with an out-of-town consultant?
So for us, it wasn't even a question for us if we would have a consultant, and a partner come alongside us to do this campaign. I mean, I suppose maybe some organizations, Kevin, and you could speak to this, if some go, we'll hire another full-time person, or I don't know what other options there would be. We knew a lift of this size, we needed experts in this to help us, because we all continued to do our 9-to-5s, our jobs. While we were really involved, we needed someone that was managing this day to day and keeping all the details. And there were so many details and follow up and all that, which Kevin just handled. So for what was the second part of the question, Jennifer?
Sorry, I was on mute. What was the response from your investors meeting with an out-of-town consultant?
Oh my gosh, everyone loved Kevin. I mean, and the thing was, we just named it and was like, yeah, we absolutely have Kevin. We have Convergent. Kevin has a whole team of people behind him also. And so that's what we were also getting. So it was great. Everyone, what's not to love? Everyone loves Kevin. Kevin has so many great stories, and
Right.
Kevin could connect with everyone. So yeah, it was great.
Thank you, Beth. You can see, I mean, we had a good story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
It's I think that just to build on this, this is outside the scope of an organization, a chamber or an EDO. If they're doing their job right, they don't have time for this. And so it's a good complement to actually have people like us to be able to step in and work with them, become part of that team, and complement what they're doing already. Because it's not forever, it shouldn't be forever. But it's important to have that expertise.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I can definitely see the value in that. I work in a similar role in a different industry, and I know, Kevin, that it's a huge value, and so that's great. I have another question. So what surprised you the most about going through the feasibility study / campaign process? Looking back, would you do anything differently?
Well, one of the things that is kind of the best practice for a feasibility study is to be able to go right into a campaign at the completion of the study. We weren't able to do that in this case for various reasons. So there was a kind of a long period. In this case, it was about what, 10 months or so before, between study and maybe it was 8 months between
Yeah.
study and the start of the campaign. So, a study typically has a bit of a shelf life. I mean, you've met with people, that's fresh in their mind. Um, the plan is it's closer to, it's in process. You've got a little bit of momentum. So there's a huge benefit to actually have a study and then go forward with a campaign. And then, it's only been a matter of maybe a month or two since you actually met with these people and you know them. I did not actually do our study for Lakeshore Advantage, so I was starting fresh. But the best practice is if you can do that, seamlessly, like you can move right into it for various reasons.
And for us, I think there weren't really surprises, I would say, with the feasibility study, but I would say it felt a little bit like a shot in the arm for the team because you were having all these conversations. Convergent was having these close conversations with our investors, and you kind of just wonder, like, oh man, what are they going to say? And there was just a lot of really positive. It was a big encouragement. We got a lot of great feedback, and that was fun to share with the team. So it was like you guys came back and said, wow, you really have asking rights. They have a lot of confidence in you as a team, and that felt good.
I would add too, one of the things that we we didn't do, which was kind of, or did do, which is kind of out of characters, we set a goal beyond the range of what we found in the feasibility study. We went higher than what the study found. So that was a little bit of something, I would say a little bit of a risk. But I mean, I think that was outweighed by the confidence that the community had in the leadership. And we hit our goal. We exceeded the goal. So all good.
That's great. I just have one more question before we end, if that's okay. So could you tell us more about how you developed your program of work prior to the feasibility study?
That's for you, Beth.
Yeah, the program. So that was man. Okay, so that was that was real early in the phase, and that was our prospectus for us. What we did because we understood that for Convergent to do the feasibility study, there had to be something for our investors to respond to say, okay, here's the challenges, here's the work that they could do if they had the capacity to do to it. So for us, what that process looked like was our team kind of starting that draft. Then we whittled it down with our leadership team and spent a lot of time working through that. Again, getting it to a draft and then sharing that with our board and giving our board a chance to kind of poke holes in it and say, well, what about this? That doesn't make sense. I don't think you should do that. And then still the prospectus, the feasibility study prospectus was still a draft. It wasn't, a final, like, yes, we're doing this. But that really helped us then when it was ready to do the case for investment. We had that draft already somewhat ready to go and it half baked. So that was our process.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for sharing and giving this amazing presentation today. We really appreciate what you've done today. And so for our participants, we'll be sharing this recording. And again, thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Beth, for taking the time to be with us today. We appreciate it.
Happy to
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right, great. Well, everyone have a great day and thank you again.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.